But for people in Don Valley, what I've tried to do in the job as Shadow Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change is find a way to make sure that people understand what the impact is of climate change much closer to home. And, no better example would be that in the last few years we've had more severe bouts of extreme weather that has been caused floods by wind and what have you, and we've seen the impact on our own communities. So what I try to do in my own constituency is talk about the relationship between things happening thousands of miles away to what is happening here at home. But also, I think for people in my own constituency for whom, it's not the richest place in the UK to live, we built Don Valley and Doncaster on coal mining. That's the history of Doncaster and South Yorkshire. And what I've tried to do is to try and reframe the energy debate about one which is a new industrial revolution where we can use cleaner forms of technology, and with that can come jobs as well, whether that's in terms of generating energy but also in terms of energy efficiency as well. And I think in that way I've tried to make sure during my 4 years in this job that I've tried to ground climate change in some of the real concerns of ordinary people for whom this may not be number one on their agenda.
I mean, it's been noticeable that the Labour leader Ed Miliband has almost gone out on a limb saying that climate change is the single most important thing we can do for our children and our grandchildren, which isn't often something you hear from many party leaders. I mean, do you think this is going to be an issue at the election in any way?
Look, I think people are concerned about the environment, but often it's what's outside their front door. But I think part of what politicians have to do and why Ed is a leader when it comes to this discussion is sometimes we have to talk about the things that aren't the everyday things that ordinary families are concerned about. I mean, I think, whether it's here or in America or elsewhere, if you ask people about, what are their concerns for their families, they'll often say things like, I want to get a job, I want a roof over my head, I'm concerned about access to healthcare, and I want to live in a safe community. And I think, part of what we have to do is demonstrate that in tackling climate change, it is absolutely crucial for our planet, for the world we live in. But importantly, it's about, trying to provide some reassurance about those other things that ordinary families are concerned about. And that is about there is an opportunity for jobs and growth through cleaner energy. But also it's about making our communities safer. And I think it's, part of our job is to paint those pictures and draw those connections. Ed was absolutely on the button a year ago when, some of the communities here in the UK were suffering enormously from floods. And making the point that, this is a national security issue. We need to have resilience, but also we've got to have plans to act against further, eroding of our protection as a planet because of global warming and climate change that follows that.
I was going to ask you about the security issue because particularly, I guess, in the US, Barack Obama has gone out perhaps on a limb and saying it's as serious as terrorism, but you don't so much hear that over here. I mean, Philip Hammond, the Foreign Secretary, gave a speech yesterday and he talked about the dangers posed by Russia and by ISIS. If a Labour government came to power, would you be treating climate change as a national security issue?
Yes, we would, and Ed has made that point. And look, I was in the last Labour government for a period Europe Minister, and so I can remember back in 2008 when there was another difference of opinion between Russia and Ukraine. And I was physically at a meeting of other colleagues when Putin was turning off the gas supply to Ukraine. And clearly that was, again, for some of my colleagues in parts of the European Union who were more reliant on Russian gas than here we are in the UK, it really brought home how conflict, but also power plays can affect our energy security and, control of assets around the world when it comes to energy is another aspect and of the concerns of, if you like, the geopolitical side of things that we have to deal with as well. That's why I think there's an important argument around energy and security, which is about how we can realise more homegrown, cleaner energy, renewable energy, but also how we see this as, a source of which others can make mischief, but also in the most dire situations create huge conflict as well. So I think it is an important issue, and water's another example, not just, if you like, the energy sector. Water's another example of, well, who controls the water can control an awful lot more beyond that as well. And I'm really pleased that in the last year in particular, I've been working with our Shadow Foreign Secretary, Douglas Alexander, Mary Cray, who now leads on international development, before that Jim Murphy, on how we can look at ways in which we can bring together our ambitions to tackle world poverty, but within that see realising sustainable forms of energy as part of the answer to tackling poverty as well, for the many communities around the world who haven't got access to light and heat in a safe way.